This abandoned puppy found its new mother, but what happened next made everyone cry. On a stormy night, a tiny white pup clings desperately to the chest of a massive German shepherd, refusing to let go. A struggling worker takes them in, thinking it's just a simple rescue. But soon she discovers this isn't an ordinary stray. The big dog carries a secret, and the little one's survival could expose something far darker than anyone expects. As danger closes in and powerful forces try to tear them apart, one woman must risk everything to protect the bond that even fire and fear couldn't break. Why would someone fight so hard to take these dogs back? What hidden truth could turn a heartbreaking rescue into a fight for justice? And when the truth finally comes out, who will survive? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The rain drummed against Delphine Kearns's windshield as she navigated her old Toyota through the pre-dawn darkness. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the empty highway ahead. She'd driven this route to the Pine Grove Motel hundreds of times, but something felt different this stormy morning. Her tired eyes stayed alert, scanning the road as windshield wipers fought against the downpour. The digital clock on her dashboard read 4:15 in the morning. Another early shift of changing sheets and scrubbing bathrooms awaited her. The thought made her shoulders ache, but bills needed paying. Her wipers squeaked across the glass as she approached the concrete overpass that marked the halfway point of her commute. That's when she saw it. A dark shape huddled against one of the support pillars. Lightning flashed again, and Delphine's breath caught in her throat. A massive German shepherd stood guard beneath the bridge, its broad body curved protectively around something small and white. "Oh my God," she whispered, slowing her car. The ice. Shepherd's amber eyes reflected her headlights, alert and wary. Pressed against its side was a tiny white puppy, trembling and soaked despite the larger dog's efforts to shield it from the wind and rain. Delphine's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She couldn't just drive past. The image of those two, dogs, alone in the storm, pulled at something deep in her chest. With a quick check of her mirrors, she guided her car onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking in the darkness. Her phone was in her hand before she'd fully processed her next move. The rain pelted her windshield as she opened her camera app, hands shaking slightly as she pressed record. Through the lens, she captured the heartbreaking scene. The huge shepherd standing guard, its gray-flecked muzzle suggesting age and experience, while the tiny white puppy huddled beneath it for protection. "This isn't right," Delphine murmured to herself, ending the recording. "They can't stay out here." She took a deep breath, grabbed her umbrella from the back seat, and stepped out into the storm. The wind immediately tried to tear the umbrella from her grip as she made her way toward the dogs, her non-slip work shoes splashing through puddles. The German shepherd's head snapped up as she approached, a low growl rumbling in its chest. Delphine stopped several feet away, speaking in the gentlest voice she could manage over the sound of rain and passing trucks. "Hey there, big guy. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you or your little friend." The shepherd's ears twitched at her voice, but its protective stance didn't waver. Up close, Delphine could see scars around its ears and muzzle, telling stories she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The white puppy peeked out from behind its protector, round eyes almost comically large in its tiny face. "You must be freezing," Delphine continued softly. "Both of you. I have a car. It's warm and dry." She took another careful step forward. "I can help." Something in her tone must have reached the shepherd because its growl faded to a questioning whine. The big dog studied her face intently, as if weighing her words and worth. Delphine held still, rain drumming against her umbrella, and let it make its decision. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the shepherd's posture relaxed slightly. It nudged the white puppy with its nose, encouraging it to stay put. then took a tentative step toward Delphine. She remained motionless as the dog approached, its powerful frame moving with a grace that belied its size. The shepherd sniffed her extended hand, warm breath ghosting across her rain-chilled skin. Then, to her amazement, it pressed its grizzled muzzle into her palm. The gesture felt like trust, and Delphine's heart squeezed. "That's it," she whispered. "Good boy. Such a good boy." The white puppy, perhaps emboldened by its protector's acceptance of Delphine, wobbled out from its shelter. Its coat was matted with mud and rain, but there was something endearingly sweet about its oversized eyes and tiny stature. The shepherd immediately moved to stand beside it, still keeping watch. "Come on," Delphine said, slowly backing toward her car. "Let's get you both somewhere dry." To her relief, the dogs followed. The shepherd stayed close to the puppy, matching its unsteady pace. When they reached her car, Delphine opened the back door and watched as the bigger dog gently nudged its small companion inside before following. They settled together on her worn back seat, the shepherd's body curled protectively around the puppy just as it had been under the bridge. Back behind the wheel, Delphine's hands were shaking as she pulled up the video she'd recorded. Without really thinking it through, she posted it to her social media accounts. Not that she had many followers. She added a quick caption. "Found these two under Highway 16 overpass. Big one protecting the little one from storm. Going to help them. Please share." She glanced in her rearview mirror at her unexpected passengers. The shepherd's amber eyes met hers, somehow both grateful and guarded. The white puppy had already fallen asleep, secure against its protector's side. "What am I going to do with you two?" she wondered aloud. Her shift at the motel started in 20 minutes, but she couldn't just leave them in her car. The thought of taking them to a shelter made her stomach twist. Something told her these two needed to stay together. The shepherd made a soft huffing sound, as if answering her question. Despite the early hour and the uncertain situation she'd just walked into, Delphine found herself smiling. "Yeah, we'll figure it out," she assured them, putting her car in drive. "First things first, let's get you both dried off and fed. I know the kitchen staff at work. They always have leftovers from the continental breakfast. And my boss, well, she's got a soft spot for dogs." As she pulled back onto the highway, Delphine had no way of knowing that her simple act of kindness, and the video evidence of it, was already beginning to spread across the internet. The image of a battle-scarred shepherd protecting a vulnerable puppy in the storm would soon capture hearts far beyond their small town. But for now, it was just the three of them, a tired motel housekeeper, a watchful shepherd, and a tiny white puppy, all driving through the rain toward whatever came next. Lightning still flashed overhead, but inside Delphine's car there was warmth, there was safety, and there was the beginning of something that felt a lot like hope. From the back seat came the sound of gentle breathing, the puppy snoring softly against its protector's side. The shepherd remained alert, but its posture had relaxed slightly in the warm car. Delphine adjusted her rearview mirror again, studying their reflections. There was something almost noble about the big dog's profile, despite its obvious hard life. And the puppy, even dirty and bedraggled, had an innocence that tugged at her heart. "We'll need to call you something," she mused quietly. The shepherd's ears perked up at her voice. "You're like a sentinel, aren't you? Standing guard like a chess piece," she smiled. "How about Rook, for the castle that protects the king?" The dog's tail thumped once against the seat, and Delphine took it as approval. "And your little friend?" She watched as the white puppy snuggled closer to Rook's warm fur. Mallow, like marshmallow, all soft and white. Rook made another huffing sound, gentler this time, and rested his chin protectively over Mallow's sleeping form. The names felt right, fitting for this unlikely pair who'd appeared in her life like characters from a story. The Pine Grove Motel's neon sign glowed through, The rain ahead, and Delphine took a deep breath. She had no idea how her boss would react to her showing up with 2 stray dogs, or what complications might arise from her impulsive rescue. But looking at Rook and Mallow in her mirror, she knew she'd made the only choice she could have. Sometimes, she thought, the hardest moments in life came down to simple decisions. Stop or keep driving, help or look away, act or remain silent. This morning, in the rain and darkness, she'd chosen to stop. Whatever happened next, she would face it knowing she'd listened to her heart. The storm continued its percussion on her roof as she pulled into the motel's parking lot, but inside her car she'd created a small sanctuary. For now, that would have to be enough. Delphine's phone buzzed continuously as she made her morning rounds at the Pine Grove Motel. The short video she'd posted of rescuing Rook and Mallow was spreading faster than she could have imagined. Every few minutes, new notifications popped up, shares, comments, likes. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the 2 dogs safely tucked away in her small employee quarters behind the motel office. Over 50,000 views already, she muttered in disbelief, glancing at her phone between stripping beds in room 12. The outpouring of support warmed her heart, but something about all the attention made her uneasy. She hadn't expected the video to travel beyond her small circle of local friends. The morning dragged on as Delphine worked her way through her cleaning routine. Around 9:30, her manager Randy's voice crackled over her work radio. "Delphine, office now!" Her stomach clenched as she gathered her cleaning supplies. Randy stood behind the front desk, arms crossed, his usually friendly face stern. "We need to talk about those dogs." "They're just staying temporarily until I can—" Delphine started. "No pets allowed. Employee handbook's crystal clear on that." Randy's voice was gruff but held a note of regret. "Look, I like you, Delphine. You're one of my best workers, but I can't have dogs living on the property. Corporate would have my head." "But they have nowhere else to go," Delphine protested. "The bigger one, Rook. He's protecting the puppy. They've clearly been through something terrible." "Not my problem." Randy shook his head. "Either the dogs go, or you do. I hate to put it that way, but that's how it is." Before Delphine could respond, the office door chimed. A heavy-set man in a sweat-stained animal control uniform walked in, clipboard in hand. His name tag read, C. Dunson. "Morning," he said, avoiding direct eye contact. "I'm Officer Clive Dunson from County Animal Control. Hear about the dogs from the viral video?" Delphine's protective instincts flared. "What about them?" Dunson shuffled through his paperwork. "Got a claim here from Marlo Gentry, respected show dog breeder up in Sterling County. Says the shepherd matches description of his breeding stud that went missing last month. Needs to verify the chip. Mr. Gentry is a pillar of the community," Dunson added, still not meeting her eyes. "Multiple champion bloodlines, very concerned about his dog." "These dogs were abandoned," Delphine said firmly. "The big one was protecting the puppy under the highway overpass in the rain. If they belonged to someone, why were they out there?" "That's what we need to determine." Dunson finally looked up, his expression carefully blank. "Going to need to scan those chips," Randy cleared his throat. "Perfect timing, actually. The dogs can't stay here anyway. Against policy." Delphine felt trapped between them. Something about this didn't feel right. The way Rook had been so protective of Mallow, their obvious signs of neglect, it didn't match with Dunson's story of a respected breeder. "They're resting right now," she said. "I can bring them by the shelter later today." "Need to do this now," Dunson cut in. "Mr. Gentry's very anxious to resolve this situation." Reluctantly, Delphine led them to her quarters. Rook raised his head as they entered, positioning himself in front of Mallow. The puppy peered out from behind his protector's bulk, trembling slightly. Dunson approached with his scanner, but Rook's low growl stopped him short. "Might need to muzzle this one," he muttered. "Let me," Delphine said quickly. She knelt beside Rook, speaking softly. "It's okay, boy. We just need to check something." The big shepherd allowed her to hold him still while Dunson ran the scanner over his shoulder. The device beeped, but Dunson frowned at the readout. He tried again, then checked something in his paperwork. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Problem?" Delphine asked. "Chip number's not matching what I have here," Dunson said. "Could be a malfunction. Let me try the pup." But when he scanned Mallow, his frown deepened. The puppy's chip showed similar inconsistencies, numbers that didn't align with any official records. "Something's not right with these chips," Delphine said. "They look like they've been tampered with." She pointed to barely visible scarring around the injection sites. Dunson quickly gathered his paperwork. "Need to make some calls. Don't go anywhere with these dogs until this is sorted out." He hurried from the room, Randy following close behind. Alone with the dogs, Delphine's mind raced. The strange chip discrepancies, Dunson's nervous behavior, this supposedly respected breeder she'd never heard of, it all pointed to something deeper and darker than a simple case of lost pets. Rook pressed against her leg, his amber eyes intense and knowing. Mallow crept out to lick her hand. Looking at them, Delphine made a decision. Whatever was really going on here, she wouldn't let anyone take these dogs until she uncovered the truth. She pulled out her phone and started researching. Marlowe Gentry. If there was something suspicious about his breeding operation, she would find it. The dogs had chosen to trust her, and she wouldn't let them down. The viral video that had seemed like such a blessing now felt like a spotlight she wasn't sure she wanted. But as Rook's steady presence anchored her and Mallow's sweet face gave her courage, Delphine knew she'd stumbled onto something important. These dogs needed her to be their voice, no matter what powerful forces might want to silence them. She looked at her phone, now showing over 100,000 views, and wondered how many other dogs might be suffering behind the respectable facade of Marlowe Gentry's breeding operation. The thought strengthened her resolve. Whatever came next, she would protect Rook and Mallow while she dug for answers. A text notification popped up from Randy. "Corporate called. Dogs must be gone. By end of shift today." Delphine scratched behind Rook's ears as she considered her options. Time was running out, but she wouldn't be rushed into making a mistake. These dogs had already been through too much to hand them over to anyone without being absolutely certain of their intentions. Outside her window, she saw Dunson sitting in his truck, apparently making calls. His agitated gestures confirmed her suspicions. There was much more to this situation than a simple ownership dispute. Her phone buzzed again with another flood of notifications about the viral video. The publicity that had initially seemed like a blessing now felt dangerous. She'd inadvertently shone a light on something powerful people wanted to keep hidden. But as Mallow snuggled closer and Rook maintained his protective watch, Delphine knew she couldn't back down. Whatever the cost, she would find out the truth about these dogs' past and ensure their future safety. The real question was, how much time did she have before Marlowe Gentry himself showed up to claim them? The late morning sun cast long shadows across the Pine Grove Motel's parking lot when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up, its tinted windows reflecting the autumn light. Delphine stood in the doorway of her small employee quarters, her heart pounding as a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit emerged from the vehicle. His polished appearance seemed out of place against the modest motel backdrop. Marlowe Gentry adjusted his silk tie and strode toward her with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. Behind Delphine, Rook let out a low growl, and she felt the shepherd press against her leg protectively. "Ms. Kearns," Gentry called out, his voice smooth as honey but with an underlying edge. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." He held up a folder of papers, waving them slightly. "I have all the documentation right here. That shepherd is one of my prize breeding dogs." Delphine's hand instinctively went to Rook's head, feeling the dog's muscles tense beneath her fingers. "I'm sorry, but I need more than just papers. The way I found him and the puppy—" "Ah, yes, your little viral video." Gentry's smile didn't reach his eyes. "An unfortunate situation. One of our kennel staff left a gate unsecured. But as you can see," he opened the folder, displaying official-looking documents. "Rook is registered to Gentry Show Kennels." Something about his practiced explanation felt wrong to Delphine. She remembered how she'd found Rook, protecting the tiny puppy under that overpass, both of them obviously neglected. It didn't match the picture Gentry was painting. "I'd like a vet to examine them first," Delphine said firmly, though her voice shook slightly. "Just to be sure everything's in order." Gentry's polite facade cracked for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. "That won't be necessary. I have my own veterinary staff. Now, please hand over my property before this becomes complicated." The threat in his voice was clear, but Delphine stood her ground. "I've already contacted someone. She should be here any minute." As if on cue, a beat-up Honda Civic pulled into the lot. Tamsin Boyle stepped out, wearing blue scrubs covered in pet hair. The young vet tech carried a medical kit and walked toward them with purpose, her freckled face set with determination. "Perfect timing," Delphine said, relief flooding through her. "This is Tamsin from Valley View Animal Hospital." Gentry's jaw tightened. "This is unnecessary. I have legal ownership papers right here. It'll just take a few minutes to check them." "Over," Tamsin said, her tone professional but firm. "Standard procedure when there are questions about ownership." Inside Delphine's quarters, Tamsin began examining Rook while Gentry waited outside, his impatience visible through the window. The vet tech's gentle hands moved methodically over the shepherd's body, checking for injuries and signs of neglect. "Look at these old scars," Tamsin murmured, parting the fur around Rook's ears. "And the muscle definition? This isn't just any show dog." She reached for a small UV light from her kit. Delphine watched anxiously as Tamsin shined the light along the inside of Rook's ear. "Wait, what's that?" she asked, noticing how Tamsin's expression changed. "Hold him steady," Tamsin instructed, using her fingers to carefully position Rook's ear. Under the UV light, a faint pattern emerged, numbers and letters that had been tattooed into the skin. "This is a canine unit identification tattoo. It's mostly been removed, but you can still make out parts of it." Delphine's breath caught. "You mean he was a police dog?" "Not just any police dog. A highly trained K-9 officer." Tamsin's voice was tight with concern. "These tattoos are permanent identification marks. Someone tried to remove it but didn't quite succeed." Outside, Gentry paced, checking his expensive watch. The discovery cast his polished appearance and documentation in a sinister new light. This wasn't just about a lost dog anymore. This was something much darker. "We need to document everything," Tamsin said, pulling out her phone to take pictures. "The tattoo, the scarring, his condition, and we need to contact the authorities. Tampering with a K-9's identification is a serious offense." Delphine looked down at Rook, who sat calmly during the examination, his intelligent eyes fixed on her face. The loyal shepherd had already been through so much. How many more secrets did his scarred body hold? "He's not going anywhere," Delphine said firmly, her earlier uncertainty replaced by resolution. She moved to the door and opened it just enough to address Gentry. "I'm sorry, but there are some irregularities we need to check out. I can't release him to you right now." Gentry's sophisticated veneer cracked completely. "You're making a very big mistake," he snarled, all pretense of friendliness gone. "That dog is my property, and you're going to regret interfering in my business. Maybe we should all talk to the police about that K-9 tattoo someone tried to—" "Remove!" Tamsin called out from inside, her voice steady despite the tension. The color drained from Gentry's face. For a moment he stood frozen, then spun on his heel and stalked back to his Mercedes. The engine roared to life, and he peeled out of the parking lot, leaving the scent of burned rubber in the air. "He'll be back," Tamsin said grimly, still documenting Rook's condition. "Men like that don't give up easily. And if he's involved in something illegal involving canines..." She let the thought hang in the air. Delphine knelt beside Rook, drawing strength from his solid presence. The simple act of helping two stranded dogs had turned into something far more dangerous than she'd imagined, but looking into Rook's trusting eyes, she knew she couldn't back down now. "We need to find out where this tattoo came from," she said. "Which police department he belonged to, what really happened to him. There's a whole story here we don't know yet." Tamsin nodded, carefully putting away her equipment. "I'll make some calls. Reach out to K9 units in the region. Someone must be missing this boy." She scratched behind Rook's ears, earning a gentle tail wag. Whatever happened to him, it wasn't legal. And whoever tried to hide his identity knew exactly what they were doing. Delphine watched as Rook padded over to check on Mallow, who had been napping in a makeshift bed of blankets. The big shepherd gently nosed the puppy, who yawned and snuggled against him. Their bond was obvious, and somehow tied to whatever dark secret Gentry was trying to hide. "We'll need to be careful," Tamsin warned, packing up her kit. "If he's really involved in something criminal, he's not going to let this go easily. Do you have somewhere else you can stay?" Delphine thought of her tiny apartment, her limited resources. "I'll figure something out. I can't let him take them, especially not now." "I'll file reports with every agency I can think of," Tamsin promised. "The more documentation we have, the safer you'll all be. And I'll come back to check on them tomorrow." As Tamsin left, Delphine sat on the floor beside her rescued charges, her mind racing with questions. How had a trained police dog ended up in Gentry's possession? What was he trying to hide? And most importantly, how could she protect Rook and Mallow from whatever darkness they'd escaped? Rook rested his head on her knee, his warm weight reassuring. Despite her fear, Delphine felt a surge of determination. She'd stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple rescue. But she wasn't going to back down. Whatever the cost, she would find out the truth and keep these dogs safe. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Tamsin's small veterinary clinic as Delphine sat nervously on a metal folding chair, watching the young vet tech examine Rook's ear under a bright examination light. Tamsin's freckled face was scrunched in concentration, her red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail as she gently manipulated the shepherd's ear. "I'm certain now," Tamsin said, straightening up and reaching for her phone to take photos. "There's definitely a tattoo here. It's faded, but the numbers and letters are still visible. K9 472 PDX. Delphine leaned forward, her heart racing. "What does that mean?" "Well, K9 is obviously indicating police or military service," Tamsin explained, her fingers flying across her phone screen as she documented everything. "The rest looks like some kind of identification code. We should try to track down someone who knows more about K9 unit procedures." As if on cue, Tamsin's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened as she read the message. "Actually, I might know someone. Who can help? My uncle used to work with the K9 units before he retired. His name's Hollis Vance. He lives just outside town now. Would he be willing to look at this?" Delphine asked, hope rising in her chest. "Let me call him," Tamsin said, already dialing. After a brief conversation, she turned back to Delphine with a smile. "He says we can come over right now if we want." 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a modest ranch house on the outskirts of town. The yard was well-maintained but simple, with a weather-worn American flag flying from the porch. Hollis Vance met them at the door, a tall man in his late 50s, wearing a faded baseball cap, his movements slightly stiff as he led them inside. "So this is the shepherd from the viral video," he said, kneeling carefully to examine Rook. The dog sat calmly as Hollis gently checked his ear, his weathered face growing increasingly serious. "I know this code system. This dog was definitely..." Police trained probably about 8 or 9 years ago based on the numbering sequence. PDX means he was with the Portland division. But Marlowe Gentry claims Rook is his breeding dog, Delphine said. He's got paperwork and everything. Hollis's expression darkened. Gentry, huh? I've heard things about his operation over the years. Nothing good. He stood up slowly, wincing slightly. Listen, if you're going up against him, you need to be careful. And you need proof. Solid documentation of everything. I've been taking photos and videos, Tamsin offered, and keeping detailed medical records. That's good, but you need more, Hollis said. You need to track his movements, his business, operations. Document everything suspicious. Just then, Delphine's phone rang. She answered to hear a familiar voice. Reese Halter, the county fire inspector she'd helped during an electrical emergency at the motel last year. Delphine? I saw your video with the dogs, he said. Listen, I do regular inspections at Gentry's kennel facility. There's some things you should know. 20 minutes later, Reese joined them at Hollis's house. He was still in his work uniform, his dark hair slightly disheveled as he spread out several inspection reports on the kitchen table. I've been concerned about conditions there for a while, he explained, pointing to various citations. Overcrowding, electrical hazards, poor ventilation. But somehow the violations always get cleared just before follow-up inspections. We need to document what's really going on there, Tamsin said. Track when shipments arrive, when dogs come and go. Hollis nodded slowly. I still have some contacts in law enforcement. They might be interested in a pattern of suspicious activity. Delphine looked around at these 3 people who had stepped forward to help, the compassionate vet tech, the retired K-9 handler, and the conscientious fire inspector. For the first time since finding Rook and Mallow, she felt less alone. They spent the next few hours developing a plan. Tamsin would continue documenting the dog's medical conditions and work on tracking down Rook's service history. Hollis would reach out to his old contacts and help analyze any patterns they uncovered. Reese would keep detailed records of his inspections and try to time them when shipments were arriving. We need to be smart about this, Hollis cautioned. Gentry's got money and influence. We document everything, build our case carefully, and most importantly, we watch each other's backs. As the sun began to set, they gathered around Hollis's kitchen table with notebooks and laptops, creating a shared online document to track their findings. Delphine felt a surge of determination as she looked at her newfound allies. She was no longer just a motel housekeeper trying to protect 2 dogs. She was part of a team working to expose the truth. First thing tomorrow morning I'll start. Tracking delivery schedules, Reese said, making notes in his inspector's log. I can do surprise inspections if we notice unusual activity. I'll reach out to some K-9 unit contacts in Portland, Hollis added. See if anyone remembers Rook's service record. Tamsin pulled up her calendar on her phone. I can adjust my clinic, scheduled to be available whenever we need to document new evidence, and I've got a good camera for taking detailed photos. As they finalized their plans, Delphine felt something she hadn't experienced since this all began. Hope. She wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Each person at this table brought different skills and resources to help expose Gentry's operation. Thank you, she said softly, looking around at each of them. I know helping me could cause trouble for all of you. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks, Reese replied, meeting her eyes with quiet intensity. You taught me that during that electrical emergency at the motel. Besides, Tamsin added, scratching behind Rook's ears, these dogs deserve justice, and Gentry needs to be stopped before more animals get hurt. Hollis nodded gravely. I've seen too many cases swept under the rug in my career. Not this time. As they left Hollis's house that evening, Delphine felt stronger than she had in days. She wasn't just a solitary caretaker anymore. She was part of something bigger. Together, they would uncover the truth about Gentry's operation and protect not just Rook and Mallow, but all the other dogs who might be suffering. The next few days saw their plans spring into action. Tamsin created detailed medical records for both dogs, documenting every scar and health issue that suggested neglect. She discovered that Mallow had likely been bred far too young, explaining her tiny size. Reese began making careful notes about delivery patterns at Gentry's kennel, noting that large shipments seemed to arrive late at night when the facility was supposedly closed. He also documented numerous building code violations that mysteriously disappeared from official records. Hollis worked his old contacts, slowly piecing together Rook's history. The tattoo numbers matched a police dog who had supposedly been honorably retired, but the paperwork trail went cold after that. They met regularly at Hollis's house, comparing notes and building their case. Each new piece of evidence revealed more about the scope of Gentry's operation. Delivery records showed far more dogs moving through the facility than were officially registered. Building plans revealed hidden areas not included in inspection reports. "He's running a puppy mill behind the legitimate kennel business," Hollis concluded one evening, studying their gathered evidence. "Using retired service dogs for breeding, probably other dogs too. The show dog operation is just a front." Delphine thought about Rook and Mallow, how they'd escaped and found their way to that highway overpass. "How many other dogs are trapped there?" she wondered aloud. "That's why we need to make this case solid," Reese said, squeezing her shoulder gently. "So when we take it to the authorities, they can't ignore it." As their investigation continued, Delphine noticed subtle changes in herself. She stood straighter, spoke more confidently. The quiet housekeeper, who had always tried to avoid attention, was finding her voice, driven by the need to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. One evening, as they were reviewing their gathered evidence, Tamsin looked up from her laptop with excitement. "I think I found something. Old news articles about police dog retirements. Look at these photos." They crowded around her screen, looking at a 5-year-old newspaper story. There was Rook, younger but unmistakable, receiving a commendation for service. The article mentioned his handler and their plans for a peaceful retirement. "So how did he end up with Gentry?" Reese wondered aloud. "That's what we need to find out," Hollis said grimly. "And I bet we're not going to like the answer." As they continued gathering evidence, their alliance grew stronger. They developed code words and security protocols, knowing they were dealing with someone both powerful and unscrupulous. Each new discovery reinforced their determination to expose the truth. Delphine's small employee quarters at the motel became their backup meeting place, with Rook and Mallow as constant companions. The dogs seemed to sense the importance of their work, staying quietly alert during their planning sessions. "We're getting close to having enough evidence," Hollis said one evening, reviewing their documented patterns of suspicious deliveries and inconsistent records. "But we need to be absolutely certain before we move forward. Gentry's got friends in high places, and we need to make sure the dogs will be protected," Tamsin added, cuddling Mallow in her lap. "All of them, not just these two." Delphine looked around at her team, the retired K9 handler sharing his expertise, the dedicated vet tech protecting vulnerable animals, and the principled fire inspector risking his career to expose wrongdoing. Together, they were building a case that could shut down Gentry's operation for good. They were no longer just individuals fighting separate battles. They were a united force working toward justice. Each person brought their own strengths: Tamsin's medical knowledge, Hollis's law enforcement experience, Reese's official authority, and Delphine's unwavering determination to protect the innocent. As they continued their careful documentation and investigation, Delphine realized she had found more than just allies. She had found a family of sorts, bound together by their shared commitment to doing what was right, no matter the cost. The morning sun had barely crept over the horizon when Delphine headed to work, her old sedan humming along the familiar route. Rook and Mallow dozed in the back seat. She couldn't leave them alone at the motel anymore, not with Gentry's threats hanging over them. Through her rearview mirror, she noticed a black pickup truck appearing in the distance. Something about its aggressive approach made her grip the steering wheel tighter. The truck drew closer, its engine roaring as it gained on her. Her heart pounding, Delphine pressed the accelerator. The pickup swerved into the passing lane, then suddenly jerked toward her car. She yanked the wheel right, barely avoiding collision. In the back seat, Rook rose to full alert, positioning himself protectively over Mallow. The pickup dropped back slightly, then charged forward again. This time it clipped her rear bumper. Delphine's car spun wildly, tires screeching against asphalt. The world became a blur of colors as the sedan spiraled out of control. "Hold on!" she cried out to the dogs, fighting the wheel as the car careened toward the shoulder. The passenger side slammed into the guardrail with a sickening crunch of metal. The impact sent them spinning again before the car finally skidded to a stop, halfway in a drainage ditch. In the sudden silence, Delphine's ragged breathing seemed impossibly loud. Her hands trembled on the wheel as she turned to check the back seat. Rook had wrapped himself around Mallow, shielding the smaller dog with his body. Both were shaken, but unharmed. The black pickup was nowhere in sight. Its driver had fled the scene, leaving behind only tire marks on the road and Delphine's damaged car as evidence of the attack. As her initial shock faded, a cold realization settled in her stomach. This wasn't just harassment or intimidation anymore. Gentry was willing to kill her to get what he wanted. The polished businessman facade had cracked, revealing the true monster beneath. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and called Reese. "Someone just ran me off the road," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, despite her racing heart. "A black pickup, no plates I could see. The dogs are okay, but—" "Stay there," Reese cut in, his voice tight with concern. "I'm calling it in, and coming to you. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone else." As she waited, Delphine reached back to touch Rook's fur, drawing comfort from his solid presence. The big shepherd hadn't relaxed his protective stance over Mallow, his amber eyes scanning continuously for threats. The attack had made one thing crystal clear. This wasn't just about the dogs anymore. Gentry was willing to silence anyone who threatened his operation, and he had the resources to make accidents happen. The stakes had risen far beyond what Delphine had imagined when she first stopped to help two stranded dogs on a rainy morning. But as she sat there, watching Rook's unwavering protection of Mallow, she knew she couldn't back down. Someone had to stand against this kind of cruelty, had to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, even if it meant putting her own life on the line. The morning after the crash, Hollis Vance sat at his kitchen table, spreading out old case, files with trembling hands. His weathered fingers traced across photographs and reports until he found what he was looking for, a case from 18 months ago. "Here it is," he said, his voice thick with emotion as Delphine leaned in to look. "Drug raid gone wrong. Rook and his handler were separated when the suspects set off smoke bombs. In the chaos, Rook disappeared." Delphine studied the photograph of a younger Rook in his K9 vest, standing proud beside his uniformed handler. "They never found him?" "The official report said he was presumed killed in action." Hollis's jaw tightened. "But now we know better. Someone took advantage of the confusion. They stole him." Tamsin arrived then, clutching lab results from the DNA tests she'd run. Her face was pale as she laid the papers on the table. "The tests confirm it. Mallow is definitely Rook's offspring. The genetic markers are unmistakable." Delphine looked over at where Rook lay curled protectively around the sleeping Mallow. The pieces were falling into place, a heartbreaking picture of what the noble shepherd had endured. "Gentry stole him for breeding," she said softly. "A trained police dog would be valuable stock. But Rook escaped, and he wouldn't leave Mallow behind. The runt of the litter Hollis nodded. Probably wouldn't have survived without his father's protection. Explains why Gentry wants them both back so badly. Can't have evidence of his operation walking around. Tamsin pulled out more paperwork, copies of chip registrations she'd obtained. Look at these dates. According to these records, Rook was registered to Gentry's kennel 3 years ago, but we know that's impossible. He was still active duty then. Falsified records, Hollis growled. And guess who signs off on all kennel registrations in this county? Clive Dunson, Delphine said, the pieces clicking together. He's been helping Gentry cover his tracks this whole time. More than that, Tamsin added. He's been actively falsifying official documents. That's a felony. No wonder he was so quick to show up with paperwork claiming Rook belonged to Gentry. Hollis stood up, pacing the kitchen with barely contained anger. All this time. Good dogs disappearing, being used as breeding stock. How many others are there? How long has this been going on? Delphine reached out to stroke Rook's graying. Muzzle, the proud K-9 officer, reduced to a breeding machine, but his spirit hadn't broken. He'd fought his way free and protected his vulnerable pup against all odds. We have proof now, she said firmly. Real proof. The DNA tests, the falsified records, Rook's K-9 tattoo. Gentry and Dunson can't hide from this anymore. Tamsin gathered up the papers with determined hands. I'll make copies of everything. Multiple copies, stored in different places. They can't make this disappear. No. Hollis agreed, his voice hard with purpose. They can't. And they're going to answer for every single dog they've stolen and exploited. Delphine sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by scattered papers and photographs. The evidence they'd gathered so far felt fragile, like trying to build a wall with playing cards. Rook lay at her feet, his warm presence a constant comfort. We need more, Reese said, his fire inspector's uniform crisp in the morning light. Something. Concrete that can't be explained away or buried in paperwork. Tamsin nodded, shuffling through their documents. Gentry's too careful. He's got everything looking perfect on paper. Then we need to see behind the paper, Reese said slowly. His eyes lit up with an idea. I can arrange an official fire inspection of his kennel. It's been over a year since the last one. It's due. Delphine straightened in her chair. Can you really do that? Absolutely. It's my job. Reese smiled grimly. And he can't refuse without raising red flags. I'm coming with you, Delphine said firmly. When Reese started to protest, she held up her hand. I know what to look for in a breeding operation. And Rook. She glanced down at the shepherd. He might sense things we'd miss. Reese considered this, then nodded. We'll go tomorrow morning, official inspection, by the book. The next day dawned clear and cold. Delphine's heart pounded as they drove up to Gentry's elaborate gates. Rook sat in the back seat, alert and focused. The security guard couldn't deny entry to a fire inspector, especially one with proper documentation. Inside, the kennel's main building gleamed with expensive materials and careful maintenance. But as they moved deeper into the facility, Delphine's trained eye caught the warning signs. Exit doors were blocked by stacks of supplies. Extension cords snaked across wet floors. This is already multiple violations, Reese muttered, taking photographs and making notes. They reached the breeding area and Delphine's stomach turned. Cages were stacked 3 high, many too small for their occupants. The air reeked of ammonia and fear. Rook's low growl confirmed what she was seeing. In a supply closet, they found bottles of sedatives, far more than any legitimate operation would need. Electrical wiring had been jury-rigged to power heat lamps, creating a serious fire hazard. The whole setup is illegal, Reese said, documenting everything. Blocked fire exits, improper ventilation, unauthorized electrical work. His voice trailed off as he discovered another violation. Delphine felt a surge of righteous anger. This was it, the evidence they needed. gathered legally and documented by a county official. No amount of money or influence could make these violations disappear. Rook pressed against her leg, his presence steady and reassuring. For the first time since this battle began, Delphine felt the tide turning. They had finally found a way to shine light into Gentry's darkness, and what that light revealed would be impossible to ignore. As they finished the inspection, Reese's documentation complete and irrefutable, Delphine realized this was their first, real offensive move. Until now, they'd been reacting, defending. But this was different. This was the beginning of Gentry's carefully constructed facade crumbling away. The night after the inspection, Delphine couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. When her phone buzzed with an urgent text from Reese about smoke at Gentry's property, she knew she had to act. She grabbed her keys, loaded Rook and Mallow into her car, and sped toward the kennel. The old wooden barn at the back of Gentry's property was already wreathed in orange flames when they arrived. Through the crackling fire, she heard desperate barking from inside. Her heart stopped. Gentry was burning evidence with living creatures still trapped inside. "Stay here," she told Mallow, leaving him safely in the car with the windows cracked. Rook followed close at her heels as she ran toward the barn. They found a side door and burst inside. The smoke was thick, making her eyes water and her lungs burn. Through the haze, she spotted stacked crates filled with terrified dogs. As she rushed to free them, a shadow appeared in the doorway. Gentry, his face twisted with rage. "You should have left it alone," he snarled, slamming and locking the door behind her. The sound of a heavy chain being wrapped around the handle echoed through the burning building. Delphine's heart pounded as she realized she was trapped. The smoke was getting thicker by the second, and overhead beams were starting to creak ominously. But she couldn't leave the dogs. Her fingers fumbled with cage latches as Rook pressed against her legs, whining urgently. "Go!" she told him between coughs. "Find another way out!" Instead, Rook launched himself at a wooden door on the far side, his powerful body smashing through the weathered planks. Fresh air rushed in, along with a glimpse of escape. But Delphine wasn't done. She had freed 4 dogs, but 3 crates remained. The heat was becoming unbearable. Sweat poured down her face as she worked on the next latch. A thunderous crack overhead made her look up. Rafters were starting to cave in, sending burning debris raining down around her. Rook barked frantically from the opening he'd created. Through the smoke, she could see him shielding Mallow, who must have followed them into danger. The sight gave her renewed strength. 2 more cages open, 1 to go. Her lungs screamed for clean air as she reached the final crate. The metal was hot enough to blister her fingers, but she kept working at the latch. Finally, it gave way. The last dog bolted for freedom just as another beam crashed down behind her. Delphine dropped to her hands and knees, crawling through the inferno toward Rook and Mallow. The smoke was so thick she could barely see them. Her clothes were singed, her skin burning. Just a few more feet. Rook's teeth closed gently but firmly on her sleeve, helping drag her the final distance. They tumbled out into the cool night air mere seconds before the barn's structure gave way completely, collapsing in a roar of flames and splintering wood. She lay in the grass, gulping in clean air, while Rook stood guard over her and Mallow pressed close to her side. In the distance, sirens wailed. The dogs they had freed circled nervously nearby, alive thanks to their desperate rescue. The chaos outside the burning barn intensified as emergency vehicles continued to arrive. Through the smoky haze, Delphine spotted Clive Dunson trying to wave off approaching fire trucks, his hands raised as he shouted about jurisdiction and proper procedures. Reese moved quickly, his expression stern as he approached the animal control officer. "Step aside, Dunson. You have no authority here." When Dunson tried to protest, Reese firmly gripped his arm, steering him away from the emergency vehicles. "These crews need access now. Don't make this worse for yourself." Hollis was already on his phone, his voice carrying clearly through the chaos. This is former K-9 handler Vance. We need state troopers at the Gentry property immediately. We have evidence of multiple felonies, including arson and attempted murder. The commotion drew Marlowe Gentry from the shadows, where he'd been watching his barn burn. His polished facade had cracked, revealing the rage beneath. As police lights flashed across his face, he reached into his expensive jacket and pulled out a small revolver. But before he could raise the weapon, Rook launched into action. The shepherd's powerful body slammed into Gentry, knocking him off balance. The gun skittered across the gravel as Rook pinned the man down, lips pulled back in a warning snarl that showed every tooth. Mallow barked sharply from beside Delphine, his small body tense with protective instinct. Two officers rushed forward, quickly securing Gentry's hands behind his back with handcuffs. As they hauled him to his feet, his perfectly tailored suit was covered in dirt and gravel, a fitting symbol of his fallen status. "The evidence is all there," Hollis announced, holding up a thick folder. "Falsified chip records going back 3 years. Proof of stolen police dogs, including Rook. Documentation of illegal breeding practices and animal cruelty. And now attempted murder and arson on top of it all." Dunson's face had gone pale as he watched his former ally being led away. The animal control officer seemed to shrink in on himself as Reese maintained a firm grip on his arm, waiting for additional officers to take him into custody as well. "You can't prove anything!" Gentry spat as he was guided toward a waiting patrol car. But the truth was written in the flames still consuming his barn, in the freed dogs being examined by emergency veterinary staff, in the smoke damage and accelerant, traces that would tell their own story. Rook returned to Delphine's side, head held high. She buried her fingers in his fur, feeling the steady thrum of his heart against her leg. Together, they had exposed the truth. Together, they had survived. And now, finally, justice would be served. The night air filled with the sounds of justice. In motion, radio calls, camera shutters, the murmur of official statements being taken. But for Delphine, the sweetest sound was the quiet whine of contentment from Mallow as he pressed against his father's leg, safe at last from those who would harm them. In the days following the dramatic events at Gentry's property, justice moved, swiftly. The district attorney filed multiple charges against Marlowe Gentry: grand theft of police property, animal cruelty, illegal breeding operations, and first-degree arson. The evidence was overwhelming, from falsified records to DNA proof linking Mallow to Rook. Clive Dunson faced his own reckoning. The Animal Control Board dismissed him immediately, and criminal charges followed for his role in falsifying documents and enabling years of abuse. His resignation letter was a stark confession of how money had corrupted his duty to protect. At a small ceremony at the police station, Rook received his formal retirement honors. Hollis presented Delphine with Rook's official papers, his eyes misty as he watched his former colleague finally find peace. "He chose well," Hollis said softly, watching Rook lean against Delphine's leg. "You both did." Mallow thrived in his new home, growing stronger each day. The timid pup who had huddled beneath an overpass now raced through Delphine's small backyard, his white coat gleaming in the sun. Rook watched over him with proud patience, their bond deeper than ever. Tamsin became a regular visitor, bringing treats and checking on both dogs' health. "From rescue to family," she would say, smiling as Mallow bounded to greet her. One quiet evening, as Delphine walked both dogs in the park, Reese approached her. His usual confidence seemed tempered with nervousness as he cleared his throat. "I was wondering," he began, "if you'd like to have dinner with me sometime. Not because of everything that happened, but because you're one of the strongest, most caring people I've ever met." The viral video that had started it all found a perfect ending. Someone captured a moment during a community dog walk. Mallow, snuggled against Rook's broad chest, both of them pressing into Delphine's gentle touch. The image spread quickly, a symbol of hope and healing. Comments poured in celebrating their journey from a stormy highway to a loving home. Delphine looked at her small family, one massive shepherd with graying muzzle, one bright-eyed white pup, both carrying scars but finding joy, and knew that sometimes the bravest thing was simply opening your heart to love. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.